drink, doesn't do pharmaceuticals. What a guy. Anyway, today we've got a number of things that we're going to be talking about. And we've got a special guest in the house that we'll get to a little later. Her name is Z. Scott.
Attorney Z. Scott.
Z. Scott, Esquire. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Z is with the law firm of K. Scholler, where she is a partner. Does a lot of litigation, white-collar, criminal defense work. And she also wrote some briefs for Rahm Emanuel's bid to get on the ballot. And amicus curiae, you wrote certain briefs, you know.
Speak Latin to me.
Amicus
Friends of the court briefs.
Friends of the court.
Yes, friends.
Did not represent,
I mean,
but
yes.
just letting the position of many people know in their bid to, before the appellate court, is that correct? Z and
Before the circuit court.
Circuit Court.
And then
Oh,
appellate court.
Circuit Court and hey, you ended up winning. And Rahm, one of our big stories is Rahm off the ballot, you know, on the ballot, off the ballot, on the ballot.
Yes,
So,
in, out,
in, out, in. So he is, I'm sure, very relieved that that's passed now. Now there's just the election coming up on February the 22nd. So, and I just want to let you know we've got Alonzo Roden in the room today.
son of the
Alonzo,
late great Tony Roden.
Yeah,
Right.
Alonzo. Of course, we got Chuck here as our engineer, but Alonzo is streaming live. So, folks, if you want to get a good look at Don Rashid and see, now he's got a good side and a bad side, I understand. But he's
My side's 360 degrees. Please, thank you.
You can go to Borges Report, BORGES Report, REPORT, right? .com.
Reasonable facts.
BorgesReport.com, not the Borges Report, but just Borges Report, right? .com, and you can get a peek,
Get a glimpse.
see what's happening. So if you're on your computer, go to your computer and check us out. Also WVON.com, streaming live at that. So we're going to talk about Rahm bit, and of course Obama said let Rahm run, and the president picks a new press secretary. Mayoral candidates mix it up for the Tribune WGN Candidates Forum, and the state's jobless rate dips a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we've got the big thing about Egypt.
Yes.
What's going on over there? People are dying in the streets, from what I understand. And they're asking.
El Baradei, the guy, the Nobel Peace Laureate, who somehow ended up back over there, I think probably at the behest of some Western powers, probably the United States. He was under house arrest, but he is saying via a telephone interview that Egypt has collapsed in his estimation. Yes. And then attended to that whole thing, Mubarak, during his 28-year reign, they've been saying 30 years, but it's been 28 years, he has never had a vice president, and now he has appointed a vice president, and they say that's a harbinger of his intention to step down.
Well, he's 2 years old?
Yeah, he's been a long time.
Yeah, he's been there for a while.
I'm surprised he lasted this long.
Fellow military man that he's appointed as the vice president, and I think the intention though is to get is to bring his son up. I think he's trying to move his son into the position, is what I've heard. Yeah. So anyway, a lot of unrest over there.
The State of the Union this week was a big story.
How about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
what did you think about that?
I think the president comported himself very well. I think he addressed the issues that people have been wanting him to address. However, he can't please everyone, and so there are some naysayers that remain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the
What do
people,
you think?
some of the political leaders wanted to see some brim and Firestone, and I think he was very presidential, and I think he showed his executive ability to lead. And the president is supposed to do that. He's supposed to lead, not supposed to, sort of kowtow to, all these wishy-washy and flip-flopping type of ideas. But that's what a president's supposed to do. And I was quite proud of his speech and his leadership. And certainly I support the president. Don't always support every position, but of course I always say that we don't know all that the president knows. And so I think that he was very effective in delivering his State of the Union.
Well, let's hear from our guest. What do you think about the president's speech? Z, attorney Z. Scott.
Well, I think that he was very presidential. What was most interesting was the idea that they were sharing on both sides of the aisle. They came in together, they sat together, and that's been a long time coming. We want to see more unity among our elected officials on both sides of the aisle, because that kind of activity will move our country forward rather than the divisiveness we've seen from throughout Obama's presidency.
Yeah, that was something. I mean, John McCain was standing clapping.
I was amazed at that.
But I mean, Kerry was a little sour-faced, I thought, but
Yeah.
John Kerry, but McCain got up and he was clapping, and it was nice to have them just to mingle, co-mingle, or intermingle,
Right.
what have you.
Yeah, I think this whole thing with that happened in Arizona sort of forced the nation and both sides to really look at trying to bridge ourselves together as opposed to seeing ourselves at war with each other.
Spatting,
Yeah, I
petty
think that the president
spatting.
really demonstrated leadership in that area, and mainly, I think that what really infused it is that he had very young children, and this 9-year-old that was, lost her life in that shooting, I think has touched everybody, especially those with children, in a very special way.
Speaking of young green,
As I told you, I was at Mayor Daley's breakfast for Martin Luther King, and as he was saying, kids are dying on the street. We got a lot of press out of that 9-year-old in Arizona, but this is happening every day on the streets of Chicago. So we have to, really be aware of that also, and not forget what's happening right here at home. I mean, not to diminish what happened in Arizona.
and that's definitely an issue for the mayoral campaign, and it makes it very appropriate that Ms. Scott here, Attorney Scott, is here talking about her candidate, and
Right.
we like to have people call in and voice their opinion about their chosen
candidate,
candidate.
yeah, because we're trying to reach out to everyone here. We've got someone from Ron Emanuel's camp, at least, and we want to invite other candidates and their representatives to come on the show. Next week, as a matter of fact, we've got Ms. Mendoza,
Susanna
Mendoza coming
Right.
in, and we hope that Patricia Horton, who's also running for clerk of the city, will come on the show. It just happens that we ran into her last night. She was at Black Creativity, and asked if she could come on the show. So,
But given the limitation of time,
Yeah.
I do not think we'll be able to accommodate every candidate for every office, so it behooves everyone to,
yeah, if we reach out, I know there are a lot of
Yes.
talk show hosts on WVON, and in fact, I was talking to the governor last night, and he said he'd like to come on too. So I said, all right, Mr. Governor. But Danny was talking about the president's speech last night. He says, you just can't make everybody happy. So the man is really under a lot of pressure, a lot of things that we don't know. He tried to reach across the aisle a little bit with what he said, and so. But you still have these people, Bachman and who's the other guy that gave the
Paul Ryan.
Ryan.
He gave
No
the,
matter what the man
main
says,
rebuttal.
no matter how conciliatory he is, no matter how much he tries to reach, and encompass everybody, they still attack him.
One of their own said it best,
They're
nattering
team players.
nabobs of
Uh,
negativism.
yeah.
Nattering nabobs of negativism.
That's it. Well, let's get to Attorney Z. Scott here and talk a little bit about what you did on behalf of the Rahm Emanuel campaign. You filed these briefs. They were not heard before the appellate court? Were they?
Well, we filed briefs in support of his residency status. The briefs were amicus curiae, as they say in the law, but really friends of the court. They were not necessarily supporters of Rahm, but really supporters of his right to be on the ballot, which is fundamental in our democracy. Candidates' right to access to the ballot, because it's really the people who should choose who should be our leaders, and not necessarily the court. And the principle is you don't have to choose between service to the President of the United States and being physically present in Illinois in order to be on the ballot. I mean, we've sent people off to Washington to D.C. to do great things for our country. Abraham Lincoln was our president, Barack Obama is our president. None of us would maintain that either of those gentlemen lost their status as residents of Illinois just because they are serving the United States in a very important capacity. Ron was asked by President Obama to serve as his chief of staff. He agreed to do that. And no one would say that he abandoned his status as a resident of Chicago because he was serving the president. I mean, he maintained an address here, an Illinois driver's license, he paid property taxes, he even voted here. You know, all those things go into the court's final determination that he was indeed a resident of Illinois and that he did not abandon that status just because he went to serve President Obama.
What do you think about the appellate court decision? I mean, they indicated that not only must you be an elector or in that, you know, in the city, within the city, but you must also reside, and that was the intention of the legislature, at least the majority opinion of the appellate court.
Well, the majority opinion, as reviewed by the Supreme Court, was just, you know, dead wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, the Supreme Court voted 7-0 to say that, you know, the law has been clear for 150 years that, you know, you don't abandon your residency unless there's evidence of your intent to abandon your residency.
As a part of that ruling, they indicated the appellate court never determined what reside means.
Right, what it means to reside in. I mean, and that was the thing that was so, and I was actually attended the arguments in the Illinois appellate court, and they were very spirited, and you could tell from that, just the arguments alone, that there was going to be a serious discussion between the justices once the real issues went in front of them for decision. But, you know, the Supreme Court made it fairly clear that, you know, going back to 1867, our precedent has been clear, and that is, once you have facts that show that you are residents, it is, you didn't have to prove.
The burden is on
the other person to prove that you had the intent to abandon your residence. And the mere fact that he wasn't laying his head here was not enough when you had all of those other factors on the other side. So the case was, you know, as lawyers, very interesting, but pretty straightforward and simple.
There was a case.
Unless you're Bert Odelson.
Some people suggest that Bert Odelson was just a sham for that, or beer. But was there a case where a judge moved to Kentucky for a while and came back and was able to run?
Well, there was the case, I think it's the leading case, and it's one from the 1800s, and that's the Smith case, where an individual, you know, picked up and decided to move to Tennessee after the Civil War, decided that he didn't like Tennessee. And like Ron, he left possessions behind, made it clear to everyone that it was not his intent. It may not be his intent to stay permanently in Tennessee. He came back. He was appointed to the court, the circuit court, and there was a challenge to his appointment because on a claim that he wasn't a resident.
Yeah.
And the court ruled that there was no intent to abandon.
But it is that, you know, when you look at that case, the guy did move to Tennessee, and he didn't like south, you know, south of the border or Mason-Dixon land. I mean, it was his intent to go down there and live.
No, it was his intent to go there and check it out.
Check it out.
Right.
And then but he stayed for a while. He just didn't like it. He didn't like the
Stayed a few
south.
months and came back.
All right. So.
Well, unlike you know, Ron, it was, you know, I have been asked by the president to serve as his chief of staff. You know, so I stepped down from my seat in Congress, where I'm representing citizens in Chicago, and I go and serve the president. I mean, it was even more clear that he had every intent to return. I mean, he continued to even pay real estate taxes here.
Let me ask you this. Suppose, let's say he hadn't had a home, but he had been an apartment dweller, and he had moved, given up his apartment, of course, and moved to Washington, moved his family to Washington, has no home, pays no taxes here, but still attempted to vote from here. Maybe he did. Would it make a difference whether he had a residence or not? Or he gave up his apartment. He has no ties. He really hasn't been back in 7-8 years during the president's tenure. Would that make a difference, do you think?
No, I think you then have to look at the other factors that came out before in his 11-hour testimony before the Board of Elections, and that is his intent was to always return to Chicago. He maintained